Throughout human history, one thing has been a constant: crime. There are many types of crimes committed and many types of investigators who look into them. Criminals get very creative to stay ahead of the law. Find out crime doesn't pay. Join Jason Esty as he dissects various crimes, mysteries, and disappearances.
Crime Maze.
Hello everybody! My name is Jason and I go by ESTEY'S Crime Maze. Thank you so much for being here, sharing your time with me. I hope you'll listen because I got an epic video for you if you stay with me. Okay? And I want to give my deep, sincere gratitude, of course, and appreciation for all of you that have subscribed to my channel. You're amazing. This is a new channel, yet we're almost at 500 subscribers. I'm super excited and pumped, everyone, and to move forward thanks to you. And people, again, new to my channel, welcome. If you think, hopefully also, that I might have some value to share with humanity, and or if you just enjoy my videos, I hope you'll subscribe. Hope you smash that like button, hit the thumbs up, bell icon to be notified for future videos. All that good stuff helps with the algorithms apparently, as well as leaving me a comment if you feel like it, my friends. And then we can get the videos out to you guys and gals, okay? And I appreciate the engagement. I do read your comments, even if we agree to disagree at times, okay? But this video, my friends, I think it's crucially important to understand what a Psyop is. And I think, hopefully, in this video, my friends, when I put out all this information to the best of my ability, I hope that it may be beneficial for a lot of you out there, at least some of you, if not many, many. Because again, my friends, it's how our world works. It really is, even throughout time, throughout history. Psyop. You know, a lot of people use the word at times, even for this all-important case that we're going to talk about. Again, the IDAHO4, my friends. You know, for all you IDAHO4 true crime junkies and people maybe new to the case that are just jumping in, right? Now Brian Kohberger, this guy they've arrested, he's just gone to the hearings. By the way, he looks tanned. We'll get into that maybe later in this video. All part of the Psyop, I believe, my friends. How do you get a tan when you're in jail, right? And he didn't do the crime. There was no crime. You see, my friends, just really quickly, because this video isn't just based on this, but if you've watched any of my recent videos, quite a few actually now, and I hope you will, I am adamant, in my opinions, everyone, on the theory that this was a staged extraction removal operation done by the feds, everyone, in the cover of darkness, November 13, 2022. Okay, it was a total psyop, in other words, and we're going to get into it. I'm going to define it for you, everyone. You see, again, people will say the word psyop, which is great, and sometimes even with the IDAHO4 case, this all-important true crime case, wild, crazy case, it's not as tragic, though, as we've been told and led on and lied to, in my opinion. Absolutely not, my friends. But it's all fine and dandy for people to use the word. They'll throw the word psyop, but they don't define it. You know, they don't educate people, I don't think, on what a Psyop is and why. Again, it's really important, my friends. You know, I have an activist friend, amazing activist friend named Jane Scarp. She's been an activist her whole life, adult life. It started really as a teenager, apparently. And she told me, she thanks me to this day because I taught her what a Psyop is. You know, she articulates it much better than I can, but she described how it helps her overcome It helped her overcome her fear, you know, confusion, the chaos agents, the controlled opposition that would, you know, surround her and her movements that she was trying to build with other activists. She realized, well, wait a second, I don't have to be scared. This is a psyop. This is a psyop. You know, this is how some of the deep state are organizing themselves, creating these different ways to try to influence our behavior and attitudes and thinking. We're going to get into that, okay? So here's an example, my friends. Let's get into it. Psy-war, psychological warfare, the back aspects of modern day psychological operations, okay, known as Psyop. It's known by many different terms and names. You've got MISO, MISO, which stands for Military Information Support, okay? You have of course, political warfare. Some of you may have heard hearts and minds, right? And then you've got propaganda. We all know that word, right? And it's, as I've said in my other videos, but we're going to dive into the Psyop more in this one, my friends. It's any activity that's practiced mainly by psychological methods. By the way, oh, excuse me, my friends, I meant to tell you, I'm wearing these glasses. You probably wonder, why, Jason Estes Crimes, are you wearing shades indoors? Some of you may be thinking that. I have a sty on my eyes. But anyway, I digress. So, thank you. Stay with me here, please, everyone. This is really important. It's any activity that's practiced mainly by psychological methods with the aim of elucidating or evoking a planned psychological reaction in another person. Another way of saying it, and by the way, you can look up a lot of this information yourselves, everyone. I'm also going to add my own flavor along the way. It's when you, and by the way, I almost forgot, my friends, as I discuss what a Psyop is, I want to give credit to our amazing, amazing Canadian military, powerful military out there, soldiers, men and women, and of course, in the United States, amazing, powerful soldiers and Army there, military forces, Air Force, Navy, in the United States as well, okay? And you're going to understand why. They are trained in a Psyop. But as I was saying, it's any activity that's practiced mainly by psychological methods with the aim of elucidating or evoking a planned psychological reaction in another person. You could also say it's when you take selected information and indicators to an audience to affect their emotions, their motives, their value systems at times, belief systems, right? Objective reasoning and attitudes. And by the way, another way of saying it also, my friends, it's really a military or political tactic that uses communication and other non-combative means to influence, again, emotions, attitudes, and behaviors of a targeted audience. Okay? And it really, essentially, it's about, manipulating perceptions. Right, everyone? Perception management. Hello? And again, think of the IDAHO4, my friends. We're going to get into it. I want you to, as I'm talking about this, I want you to think of Steve G. Think of Brian Kohberger, you can. But think of Steve G. and that high emotional, right? This emotionally charged high emotion that he puts out, right? This narrative. Atrocity, 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 right? Trying to convince you, seemingly, that all four were stabbed to death, including his daughter, which I don't believe. You're going to understand that in this video and other videos, my friends, as I've said. And going forward, I'm going to keep telling you, I believe those students are alive. They're protected under the WITSEC program, right? Which the acronym stands for Witness Federal Protection Security Program in the United States. Okay? As I said, the feds went in there that night. They knew there was an escalating threat, my friends, I believe. They had surveillance, all around the house. Okay, my friends? Even Steve G., who I normally don't believe, admitted that to you in 2 interviews. I think that's where he was being honest. In my opinion, he's lying to you every time he tells you and tries to convince you that his daughter died. There's no evidence of any of them dying, my friends, or being unalive, right? There was no real crime scene. We'll get into that maybe more later on in this video, my friends. It was all staged. Anyway, back to a Psyop, everyone, to define it more, okay? It's really, and by the way, the purpose of a Psyop, it's to influence, again, the targeted audience's mindset and actions without using force, right, my friends? That's what a Psyop is. And again, essentially used to manipulate your perceptions. Think perception management with the ultimate goal, to achieve through whatever your desires are, right? And another way of saying it is, or part of this is, obviously it's used to usurp confessions, right? Everyone think our amazing Canadian military, United States military, militaries around the world, they will often use different types of Psyops to usurp confessions. And by the way, my friends, you have 3 different types. There's tactical, operational, strategic, okay? And it's used to usurp confessions or to to reinforce behavior and attitudes that are favorable to the originator's objective. Okay, everyone? Think about the originator in this case. If I'm right, if this was an extraction removal operation, which I'm convinced it was, in my opinion, the feds are behind it, the U.S. Marshals, although most of them are amazing, and elements of the FBI, the feds, right? Well, they're behind, and the CIA, used through corporate media, they're the originators of this objective, of this Psyop, right, everyone? And again, I believe Steve G just signed a non-disclosure with the FBI to release a certain amount of information that we're hearing over and over again. You can't trust him. Anybody who gets major mainstream media play, my friends, as Dr. Shiva said, they are part of the swarm. That's how it works, everyone, whether good or bad. And Steve G, again, everyone, he's got an agenda, and I think the feds, I agree with the woman, it's speculation, but I think they got a lot of dirt on this guy, in my opinion, potentially. Let's say they've got some dirt on him, and they may be threatening him, or coercing him, telling him, you got to put this narrative out. Again, this highly charged narrative in all the interviews, and uses his wife at times, and we know his daughter. By the way, we know Steve G, apparently he's asked money from the public, we know that, and he's received, I think as a fact, he's received over $80,000, my friends. Think about that. And many people have righteous anger towards Steve G. If they're not corporate media bought out shills and grifters and journalists, they tell you over again on Facebook and stuff, they're mad at Steve G, rightly so, because if you believe even Kaylee has been unalived, everyone, if you don't believe this was a psyop and cover up and the students are alive, if you think she's really underground, and even though they had no public open casket ceremony, hello, you think that's just a coincidence? Well, when you connect all the dots, I don't think it was, my friends, but I digress. But they're angry at this guy at times because he's collected over $80,000 on the back of his daughter's death. And he's remodeling his home, all this shit. No. What if his daughter's actually alive, again, protected in the Witness Protection Program, WITSEC, my friends, and the other three? And you got 2 roommates left alive, but gangbangers somehow did this and left Dylan Morris and Bethany Funk alive? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? And a delayed 911 call. They didn't just delay it 1 or 2 hours. You got some big YouTube creator saying, oh, well, the Aryan family thinks intimidated them not to call 911 for 8 or 9 hours. Are you kidding me? That doesn't happen, my friends, right? Reason, logic, common sense. No, the feds would have told, I believe, Dylan Morrison and Bethany Funk, don't you call 911 for 8 or 9 hours. I'm sure the feds debriefed them. This probably was somewhat pre-planned. And they told them that, we got to extract these 4, get them out of town. They're probably, by the way, I say in my videos, my friends, they're probably in Puerto Rico, if I were to guess, speculation, because the United States has a WITSEC program in Puerto Rico. We have one in Labrador in Canada too. But anyway, let's go back to a Psyop, my friends. And by the way, there's different communication methods that they try and invoke with a Psyop, right? Deploy. For example, you've got, of course, propaganda. You have information warfare, and you have, what is it called? Strategic information messaging. Strategic information messaging. And this is used to try to shapen the public's behavior and opinions. Think about Steve G, my friends. I ask you, is he being used to try to shapen public opinion and behavior with the journalists, all these interviews again that he's doing? He got interviewed by my buddy on YouTube as well, Daniel, from the Drunk Turkey Show. And I say buddy, Daniel had me on his show, but we talked about UFOs. Whole other subject, obviously, right, everyone? But Daniel knows I'm very disappointed in him, largely the IDAHO4 case, because in my opinion, he's following largely FBI, CIA narrative. Oh, he thinks Brian Kohberger, stabbed all 4, all this nonsense. Anyway, I'd love to interview Steve G, but he'll never come on my show, my friends, no matter how big I can grow my channel. Even if it was a huge channel. And by the way, I didn't start from the beginning of this case, or hopefully I'd have a lot more subscribers from you amazing people out there, but I'm very, again, thankful for the subs that I do have. But no, I would love to interview Steve G, but he would never come on, my friends, in my opinion, because I'd ask him the hard questions. I would say, Steve, wait a sec, where is the evidence? Where is any evidence at all that your daughter was unalived, brutally, stabbed to death, all these, and the coroner, other than the coroner, makes the public statement, because the coroner has to, my friends. She's bought and paid for, she's part of the Psyop, I believe, everyone, right? She says that Kaylee, she claims, has different wounds. Oh, really? She oddly describes Xana's behavior fighting for her life. When do you hear coroners talk like this, my friends? Right? This Kathleen Babbitt, I believe. She wears a lot of different hats, by the way. Defense attorney. She's been a frontline nurse, which I respect. A coroner. Someone even thinks she might be a librarian. But no, really, everyone. Of course they had to have the coroner. She's probably pressured like crazy to make some sort of public statement. But again, no evidence, my friends. I would ask Steve G, why was there no evidence of the removal of the bodies? Right, everyone? No pre-trial evidence of the bodies or autopsy. No leaked autopsy photos. No leaked crime scene raw footage, my friends. No uncensored photos. This is unheard of almost in high-profile cases, as I've said in my videos, my friends. I'll keep repeating it, right? Almost unheard of. Why? Because there was no crime scene. Reason, logic, common sense, in my opinion, everyone. And they didn't treat it like a health hazard. But it was staged, everyone. And that's part of the psyop. It was absolutely staged, in my opinion. Okay? Now, what was I going to say? I told you the purpose of a psyop. By the way, a psyop can target, of course, individuals. It can be used to target organizations, groups, governments. It can be used to target, for example, civilians, enemy forces to lower their morale. Or it can actually be used to encourage cooperation, which you would hope that more psyops would do that from our governments and shadow governments everywhere. But it also can be used to cause division, right, everyone? And we've seen that time and time again. I'm sure many of you saw that if you were associated with the protests, with chaos agents. They were all around me at times when I was a public speaker, etc. So, that's psychological operations 101, my friends. I'm telling you, this is what a psyop is, and I'm telling you, it relates to the IDAHO4, in my opinion. Absolutely, my friends. And again, once we understand, I think, largely what a psyop is, in this way, I think it can help many people out there. I think it really ultimately can help us, in part, to help us sustain a culture, ultimately to sustain ethical leadership, my friends. Because we can overcome a lot of the fear porn when our governments do try to override our human rights and fundamental freedoms, when they're trying to play all these games, right? Mind games. Same with true crime cases like the IDAHO4, everyone. When they put out these shills, and sometimes I believe, in this case, some family members that very well may be lying to you, okay? Like a Steve G and Christy G. And my friends, you don't even really have to take it all from me about the family members. By the way, I show in my videos, everyone, Christy G, Bubbly Waters caught it. I showed the clip, everyone. She was interviewed by Chris McDonough, former homicide investigator, right? And Steve G and Christy are being interviewed. Christy was rambling on, and she blurted out, obviously probably by accident, she blurted out that Maddie just bought a house. Now, we know the word she was going to finish off with. There's only one word she could have said, house. Maddie just bought a house, as in house, my friends. You can't justify that and rationalize that, right? She just bought a house. That shows you that she's alive. She's in witness protection, most likely, and alive, my friends. They're alive and well, I believe, all four. The beautiful Kaylee Gonzalez, the beautiful, vivacious Madison Mogan as well, the beautiful, vivacious Xander Canoodle, and the handsome Ethan Chapman, my friends. You don't have to feel demoralized about this case and that it was a huge tragedy like we've been told, in my opinion, everyone. No. The great news is, again, this was a staged removal extraction operation and a huge psyop, my friends. A sophisticated psyop at that. Now, some of you may be wondering, when are you going to bring up Brian Kohberger, Jason, ESTEY'S Crime Maze? Well, Brian Kohberger. Is he being used for this sophisticated psyop? I think, my friends, not only is being used for it as the perfect distraction, we're seeing it now, everyone. He has most likely agreed to this assignment. Think about it, my friends. As I've said in past videos, the deep state and the feds, elements, FBI, CIA, for example, this is a known fact throughout history, everyone. They will use, often or at times, high intelligent people, right? Embed them in high academic positions. I know, like at Harvard, Yale, they've got, I studied aerospace companies, UFOs, as I said earlier, and defense contractors, everyone. I may have a defense contractor friend or two. let's just keep the CIA defense contractors on their toes. But I might. And no, I study these guys, my friends, and they use professors at times to spin, some of the UFOs are alien, all that stuff, high academic positions. Well, Brian Kohberger, he was apparently, right, just first semester, but going for his PhD in criminology. Think about that pre-planned narrative. It has to be, everyone. It's way too tight, man. And then, you get his professor, Kathleen Ramsman. She comes on corporate media. She literally comes on News Nation, which is an interesting program, but it's CIA. It's run by the Central Intelligence Agency. It comes from CNN, my friends. News Nation. And Kathleen Ramsfield literally says, well, I didn't know, and she sort of says, I've got to feel responsible. She says in so many words that he did this. I think that's sort of what she said. I mean, it's just crazy, my friends. The narrative, think about it. It's all part of the Psyop, I believe, everyone. And Brian Kohberger, we know he wanted to enroll with the law enforcement, the police, everybody. You see the pre-planned narrative? He's an intelligence asset. Absolutely he is, everyone. He has to be, in my opinion. He's, as Ellie says, who I've done amazing interviews with. Please check out her interviews, by the way, everyone. Ellie's so intelligent. She's so on fire and digging into this case, even though she's a little bit late to the game, but never too late. I mean, she's on fire right now, everyone. We've done great interviews. We get amazing views and engagement. But Ellie said she's convinced, she thinks Brian Kohberger is an informant. And he very well may be, my friends. I thought he was literally like a federal agent, but either, federal agent through and through, or he's an informant. Either way, my friends, he's agreed to this assignment to be the perfect patsy, the perfect distraction. And then, again, maybe as an informant, if he was, they used him at first, hopefully, to help with, maybe the feds with drug investigations. Because again, everyone, I give credit. Most of the feds, even a lot of the FBI at times, even though we know that organization is very corrupt at times, FBI, but a lot of them do great work. So they never have to be mad at me, including the U.S. Marshals all over the United States in Moscow, Idaho, because I give them credit. They rescued those 4 students, my friends. They had to have. They know, they're trained about, again, escalating threats. Okay, right, everyone? Threat assessments. And they had the parents protected. We know they had security around, Xander Canoodle's, the stepmom, and the husband there, Xander's stepmom and husband, it looked like security in the cars. For sure they had security protecting them. Why not? And so obviously they're going to have surveillance, and definitely, a lot of surveillance and agents on the ground. We saw the cops, my friends. There were tons of cops at the band field. You had cops, undercover cops. They were doing drug investigations. They were doing undercover work. So how could any perps, whether it be gangbangers, Aryan Knights, Aryan families, as I've said, or cartel members, how could they really go in unscathed and do all these stabbings? No way. No way, my friends. That's why these federal programs exist. Very covert, very highly classified. Very few people are read in, my friends. But it's called a stage removal extraction operation. And I think that's really what the circumstantial evidence points to in this case. And I think it's, again, should be embraced, and it's great news. And more people are talking about it, thankfully, everyone. A lot of big YouTubers and even small YouTube channels, they've been playing it safe. They've been too afraid to talk about it. Now even some of the big YouTubers, you notice, they're even potentially bringing up that maybe Brian Kohberger was an informant. Well, no kidding. Of course he was. And they're bringing up the WITSEC program. Anyway, so again, everyone, I think it's so important to understand what a Psyop is. And I think Brian Kohberger was part of this huge Psyop a lot, with the psychological operations, right? And you saw the CIA, again, using this highly emotionally charged narrative through corporate media. Oh, now they're calling Brian Kohberger a ghost, right? It's like, and they're diving in, they get psychologists on even some of the YouTube channels, let alone corporate media, and they're trying to say, oh, his mind's twisted, I think, and he's wired differently. Meanwhile, there's no way he could have committed this, and there's no evidence that he did, everyone. No, he was probably working for the law enforcement. Again, as an informant. That's reason, logic, common sense here, folks. And look at him in the hearings. As Ellie said, this guy was so eager to say yes, yes, yes. He looked almost joyful, my friends. And he's an intelligent guy. And you're going to plead guilty? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Right? You're not going to go along and have a trial, whereas the judge was going through, you can question and cross-examine, of course, the witnesses that are testifying against you. Well, anybody with reason, logic, common sense, rational mind, and intelligent would say, absolutely, this is what I want to do. I want to have a chance to be, proved innocent here. I had nothing to do with the crime. So, don't be afraid of that down the road. Oh no, I might be found guilty and they're going to shoot me. Come on. My friends, it's a total psyop. And every time I listen to Steve G and Christy G open their mouths, boy does Steve G have a big mouth in my opinion, everyone. I just wish he would shut his mouth. But I'm telling you, isn't it obvious, everyone, in my opinions at least, that they're using this guy? Who's using him? The feds. Elements of the FBI, probably, everyone. They're using him, telling him. He's basically got a script. You go out there and you try to convince the public. You put this highly emotionally charged narrative, of course, and try to convince people that, yeah, an atrocity happened. Oh, but wait, don't talk about, there's no evidence of the bodies being removed, as I said earlier, right? No pretrial evidence of any of this. They don't talk about, well, wait a sec. They never treated this really like a health hazard. I mean, anybody saw, everyone, people have talked about the forensic investigators teams. They didn't wear proper PPE at times. They didn't wear a mask at times. They didn't wear slippers. The U.S. Marshals didn't have gloves on at times. And you got all this blood blood everywhere, folks. Are you kidding me? Of course it would be a biohazard. As I've said many times in my videos, my sister's a frontline nurse. Any nurse looking at these clips and video evidence would say, if they were honest, they would say, wait a sec. No, this is not right. This has got to be staged. They're not even treating this. This would be a biohazard, a health hazard. You see, everyone? And part of the psyop, I believe, and it confused me for the first year and a half, everyone. Remember, you had red on the foundation of the house. Yeah, I was going along with the psyop, the lie too, everyone, right? I was getting influenced with my behavior and attitudes. Hey, quiet! Sorry, the dog, my friends. But it's not real blood from a crime scene, I don't believe, everyone. No. This is pig's blood or paint, probably. And people have said it looks very fake. But they had to put that in front of your eyes, everyone, as I believe is part of the staging. It's part of a psyop, right? So thank you so much, everyone, for listening. I really appreciate it. I got a lot of hard questions for this Father Steve G. I also have some empathy towards Steve G and Christy G, even though I haven't shown it yet. But I do. I'll tell you that. Because they probably will never see their daughter again. Or they may not. It's in that respect, if that's true, that's sad. But they're lying to you, I believe, everybody, and I just wish he would shut up. And it's up to us, I guess, the public, right, to figure this out and understand, again, what a psyop is. Is Steve G, as part of this strategic sort of messaging, right, is he trying to shape in public opinion and behavior and attitudes with corporate media by putting out that emotionally high-charged narrative that, again, atrocity happened, right? All these stabbings, and now he's saying his daughter's nose was busted. Do you really believe that, my friends? Do you really believe Steve G? Just look again, everyone. Do you really believe him? Because look, I just told you, right? We all know there was no evidence of the removal of those bodies. No raw crime scene footage to this day of the crime scene, of any unalivings. No pictures of blood all over at that time, and probably will never be seen, everyone, right? Because there was no blood, my friends, and they destroyed the crime scene. It's all part of the psyop, in my opinion, everyone, right? They destroyed the house, and then you had the defense. Ann Taylor, she's in on the psyop too, I believe, everyone. She has to be. She's read in. And she defended Aryan Knights, Aryan family, gangbangers. She's all about, she's on the inside there in Moscow, Latah County. But anyway, Ann Taylor's got to be in on this show trial, my friends. That's exactly what this is, in my opinion. It's just a show trial, everyone. It's theater, like my friend Ellie says. It's just theater, okay? Trust me on that. I mean, I think it's obvious now. Anybody with half a brain, unless you're listening to Ashley Bashfield, or Nancy Grace, etc., in my opinion, everyone. But no, seriously. I mean, again, you got Kohberger, Tan, and Ann Taylor, my friends. She most likely knows what happened. She'd have to know that the feds did an extraction removal operation, that Brian Kohberger works for law enforcement, that this is a show trial. You're hired. You're going to, defend Brian Kohberger to the hilt. Oh, and then you're going to smile in the hearings, though, and allow him to plead guilty. I mean, it's so ridiculous, isn't it, everyone? As many people have been saying, so outrageous. They're trying to play you like fools, everybody, with this hideous psyop, but sophisticated one. And you don't have to buy into it. right, everyone? We don't have to buy into it. And let's understand, again, what is a PSYOP, psychological operations? And as I said earlier, my friends, or I think I said, not only can you target organizations, of course, groups, individuals, civilians, but also, foreign power governments in the fact that, and I mentioned that earlier, everyone, but you can target governments and actually have them change their policies. And how? Just real quick, everyone. They use radio broadcasts, right, for propaganda. A story apparently is a very important part of a PSYOP operation often, right? Again, they use radio, all these decades that we've had radio waves, to try to influence, whether it be civilians, governments around the world, and not only, speakers, all that stuff, but how about social media companies? Oh, before I meant to say, historically, by the way, everyone, we can just look in history, they used leaflets, for propaganda. Leaflets of propaganda. Look at Oswald in the United States there, leading up to the Kennedy assassination. I think he was a CIA shill, and he was handing out leaflets of propaganda. And today, now we know, in the last several decades, however long we've had the internet, right? They use the internet at times for PSYOP, whether it be strategic messaging, and all kinds of other communication ways, right, everyone? Information, they weaponize information at times, right? And what was I going to say? Oh, and so internet and social media companies, everyone. There's a huge YouTuber. I've exposed him before. I've named him, everyone. I'm not going to do it in this video. I got reasons not to name him today, but I've exposed this guy. Did respectful and firm, everyone. I'll give you a hint. He wears shades all the time. And I believe, I'll ask you, could it be he's on a disinformation, misinformation campaign? Because I'm telling you, everyone, believe me, it doesn't make sense that the feds, we know throughout history as part of a PSYOP, they will use agents on the internet, on social media companies to do a disinformation, misinformation campaign. You don't think it's happening with the IDAHO4? I think it is, everyone. And some of these creators, hint, 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 as part of that, one of them especially, but there's several, they talk about, I always mention it's an atrocity, right? They go with the FBI narrative. Yeah, this atrocity happened. They don't want to get in the staged crime scene. They don't want to tell you, well, wait a sec, there's no raw crime scene footage, again, of the bodies. It sure looks staged. How about the box that said American Relocation Services on it that I get into? The company's called Serva, which has a Schedule 48 that works with the feds, right, to protect confidential informants, federal government officials that are under threat, etc. That's not a coincidence, everyone, okay? In my opinion. So, again, everyone, this is really important to understand, I think, okay? Understanding what a PSYOP is. I hope I've made it clear for the most part, everyone. And again, you can influence governments around the world, at times to change their policies through PSYOP. And again, some of these creators, we got to be careful, everyone, if we really want truth and transparency and not be confused. Because when you put out that, again, that there's an atrocity and that Aryan, nice and Aryan family, this huge creator keeps saying that. And there's another creator that doesn't show their face that keeps saying the same thing. And yet they make this bold statement. This is my point, everybody, with no evidence, no concrete evidence to back it up. And they don't want to be interviewed. Are you kidding me? You don't want to be, you do hundreds of videos on this, and you don't show your eyes, by the way, and you don't want to be interviewed. You're unwilling to do that with people like myself or others that have an opposite viewpoint, trying to connect the dot on different theories. That should put up red flags, my friends, in my opinion. But today, this video is not just about any YouTube creators, but just showing you, everyone, the feds will at times use agents, right, to, again, create disinformation, misinformation campaigns. And you better believe it's happening at times with the IDAHO4. But that's why I appreciate a lot of you sleuths out there as well that are, you're not sellouts. You're trying to dig into the truth and you're interested in this fascinating case. And I think a lot of you understand to see this PSYOP for what it is. And I hope my video can bring at least some more truth and transparency into what the hell's going on and understanding, again, what a PSYOP is, how it's conducted, the different types of PSYOPs, how it can affect your emotions, your behaviors, your attitudes, etc., right? Anyway, thank you so much for listening, everyone. I really, really appreciate it today. I know I put a lot of information out to you to absorb. It may take a little while. I hope you might want to maybe even watch this video a few times or share it. And if it is beneficial to anybody out there and or yourselves or others, please feel free to leave me a comment. I'd love to read it. And it would hopefully pump me up to continue maybe do more videos on Psyops. And I would love to be interviewed by somebody, my friends, or have a guest on my live, what have you, you know. We could talk about Psyops if you think it's interesting and helpful, okay? Hope I'm making sense. Oh, and by the way, speaking of interviews, Ellie and I are doing interviews, and we're looking, and Ellie edits my videos, and then it goes on my YouTube channel here at ESTEY'S Crime Maze. I'm very thankful for all her support and help. She's an amazing activist, amazing friend and person, and she's digging in on the IDAHO4, as I said, everyone, searching for the real truth of this case, what happened on November 13, 2022. And she supports my theory. Sure as hell looks like it most likely was an extraction removal operation. And staged crime scene. Hello. So we're doing interviews and we're looking for guests. That's my point. Anyway, thank you so much. My name's Jason, ESTEY'S Crime Maze. Again, hope you'll subscribe. Hit that, smash that like button, thumbs up, and hit the bell icon. You'll be notified for future videos. Feel free to leave me that comment. And by the way, you look beautiful. You really do. So have an amazing morning, too, an afternoon or evening, wherever you are. Thanks. Till next time. Bye.